Hello and welcome to Shiny Side Out with Mackie. No Dave today on WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radios on revolutionradio.com. That's right, new website, revolution.radio. Revolution.radio. That's awesome. Where it's more than just radio. So jump in the chat room if you can. This is show number 302, 2 and 300. I'm just doing myself now. 302, and we're going to talk about the hypothesis, which we really didn't get to talk too much about last time. Last time we were reminiscing. I guess to some extent we're talking about all the shows we had done. The show before that, 300, we were lucky enough to have Solaris with us, an awesome host here. I mean, that's not all she does. She's a researcher. She's a documentary maker. She's a writer. She is a practitioner. Of what? You have to find out for yourself when you Google her. No, she's awesome. In fact, all the hosts here are awesome. So I highly recommend everybody, or highly recommend to everybody, I should say, to listen to all the hosts that have shows on this station. Very different views. Yeah, very different subject matters, very different things that you will hear. And hopefully out of this, you can form your own opinions. That would be really, really good if you could do that. And now, Revolution Radio is on the air, it's online, it's on your smart device. So grab an app to listen anywhere, or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. I looked them up. They look pretty cool. They really do. So, not getting sponsored. If you missed Solaris' show, that's bad for you and bad for me because I did. I suggest you look her up in the archives, and only costs you $5. 5 buckaroonies a month. 5 smackers. That's US dollars, of course, to access the Freedom Slips or the Revolutionary Radio archives. And you can check out her shows and everybody's shows as well. I do acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. The traditional custodians of the land. In my case, that's the Rook people, and I do it for Dave. It's the Dark and Young people, and we pay our respects to elders, past, present, and future. Like I said, I'm solo today, so you'll have to put up with my voice for the entire 2 hours. Hey, Mr. Rowe. Hey, everybody's in the chat room. That's awesome. Look who's here. It's Max Tor, and you see I'm a Jin. Mr. Solaris, I think, is still in there. That's brilliant. Omega Logos. I love that. Omega Logos. That's just the final word. Nice. Actually, the final thought, really. That's what that means. And who else do we have here? Jerry B. I'm a Jin. I think I said that. It's a lot of people here. In fact, 39 users online. 39. So you can chat if you want to. There's heaps of people here that you can chat to. It's fun. Now, having said all that, I don't want to go into any news. The news are what they are. Things are very interesting, and I expected them to be interesting because we have entered now the age of quickening. What is the age of quickening? The age of quickening is essentially the time when everything speeds up. So things are getting heated, things are becoming erratic, right? So we are seeing things developing a lot faster than they have in the past 2,000 years, longer, I don't know, since we've been keeping records. And we're going to see this pace speeding up further and further. The biggest driver of this, there would be other drivers if we didn't have this, but the biggest driver of this is technology. Technology is driving this apparent speed, which brings me to today's topic, which is the hypothesis. The hypothesis and also a number of epiphanies. Not sure how much of this I will be able to share with you. I've got 45 pages here of show notes. That's A4 pages, very close to US letter. So it's not much difference there. And that's about 16,000 words for all of you guys out there. 16,000 words I'm going to get through. Not today. I think we'll keep some of this for next week. But yeah, look, we are celebrating, well, in Australia at least, right now it's Christmas Eve. So tomorrow is Christmas Day. We have, I had 38 degrees. Dave had 40 degrees centigrade. And I'm just doing the conversion here 40, 41, and in Fahrenheit, that's 105.8 Fahrenheit. But it was, I think last week we were at 45 degrees, and that's 113 Fahrenheit. I do expect it to go to 45, probably 46 even. So 113, 115 Fahrenheit is what we have in Australia. No white Christmas for us. We are having a goose tomorrow, though, at my mother's house. And red cabbage and dumplings, potato dumplings, because we can't jump over our own shadow. We are completely caught in our traditions. What we should be doing is having a view and some very cold beers, but no, we're going to have a goose because that's what we always do. Goose or turkey or a duck. Yeah, that's where we're at. My wife, of course, won't. She's a vegetarian. She will have something else, and I applaud her for that choice. Anyway. It is the time. We've had a number of Christmas shows. We've explained to you the context and the meaning of Christmas. It is fascinating. It really is, and I believe that probably for as long as we can remember, and probably beyond that, this time of year has always been special because it is the winter solstice. That's right. It's the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere, and in fact, it's a time where the sun starts rising above the horizon yet again. So the sun goes lower and lower and lower on the horizon, each day, up to this day. And then it stays there for 3 days. Oh, 3 days, Mackie, you say? And then it rises on the 3rd. Again, yes, there's some Easter symbolism here as well. But it's a very special time of year, and any civilization that, did any kind of astronomy or astrology would have marked this time of year in the northern, I'm talking about the northern hemisphere now, in a special way. And of course, Christmas is a northern hemisphere celebration. The winter solstice was celebrated long before Christmas, in probably very much the same fashion as we celebrate it today. A time of renewal, a time of hope, a time of gift giving and festivities, frivolities, overeating certainly. It's a time to reflect as well on the year that's passed, because the next show that we have is going to be on the last day of this year. Yeah, we're probably going to do a bit more reflection there, but certainly we've seen many things change. We've seen things that we didn't think would happen. We've seen a robot or an AI. That's right, Max Tor. That's about the formula, I think. C times 9 divided by 5 plus 32. That's centigrade, and gives you Fahrenheit. I'm lazy. I searched. I did a Google search for converter. I just did that. But thank you for giving us the formula. So it's the Celsius temperature times 9 divided by 5 plus 32 that gives you Fahrenheit. A robot became the citizen of Saudi Arabia, or a citizen of Saudi Arabia. And it wasn't really a joke. It was a real thing. And there's so many other things. They have these sex toys now, these sex dolls that are being produced in Japan, eerily realistic. I don't know why we worry about birth control. Birth control is completely obsolete. Just give everybody a doll like that. You don't have to worry about birth control anymore. It's the end of the human race as we know it. Give every male one of those, done. We are done. And happy equinox to you too, SJ1. Absolutely. Yeah, so again, the chat is interactive. I urge you all to go into it. Before I start down the rabbit hole here, I do want to quickly acknowledge that this is a listener-funded radio station, meaning that you, the listener out there, everybody out there, is in fact funding the station, funding the people on it, the content to some extent, because you allow us to be here. So please do donate if you can. I can no longer see how much is being donated or how far behind we are. In the old chat, we had that visibility. There was like a little area that said how much was donated. I can't see it anymore. If anybody in the chat room can tell me where the information is now, that'd be great. But look, guys, if you got $1, look, if you spent the $5, you get access to all the archives. How great is that? That's awesome. And that's fantastic. $5, come on, seriously, right? You can afford that. $5 a month. What's that? In Australia, that's a coffee. It's a coffee. It doesn't even give you a biscuit or a cookie. It's just a coffee. Yes. Anyway, so please donate if you can. It would be great, and it is greatly appreciated. None of us ghosts. None of us ghosts. None of us hosts. I'm sure we'll be ghosts soon enough. No, none of us hosts are in fact compensated for this. We do it because we feel compelled to do so. For me, it's a great focus point. I'm able to do the research and write it down, and I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have this show as a focal point where I have to present to you. Very good. Having gone through all of that, I would like to go down the rabbit hole. Before we start, please be aware that all of this is in fact a hypothesis. Not hard fact, merely conjecture and certainly some leaps. So I do ask you to bear with me. Nonetheless, here it is, our drawing of the bow. Enjoy the ride. And just as a thought to that as well, the hypothesis is moving more and more into the realm of the theory, meaning it is getting more substantial as we go along. And it has been 6 years since we've been communicating this to you. And I have been working on the hypothesis knowingly or unknowingly for the last 40 years. When I was 8 years old, I was given a book by Charles Burnett. It was called Mysteries. I think, hold on, I can tell you exactly what it's called. It's in the back here. It was called Mysteries of Forgotten Worlds, I think. Mysteries of Forgotten Worlds. And then I got Bermuda Triangle as well. I got Atlantis as well. And I got, I think, all of Charles Burnett's books, which I found fascinating. Then I read Daniken, and on I went. I was off and away. Jerry B. We have raised $2,042, and our goal was $2,575. Thank you very much, Jerry B. So we are $533, I think, if my math is not right. Is right, $533 off. So if you can find it within yourselves to donate, it would be great. But thanks for responding. Again, that's the chat, guys. That's the chat. Get in there. It's brilliant. If you're listening on YouTube, try to dial in. I know for America it's inconvenient. I think it's like from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. In Australia right now, it's 6 p.m. or 6:15 anyway, and the show finishes at 8 p.m. So now, so the theory, right, the hypothesis, it's becoming more and more fact-based. It's becoming more and more solid, but it's still a hypothesis, even though it's moving into the space of a theory. And it is really a thought construct that I've tried to put together for the last 40 years, in earnest for the last 20. And then I met Dave as well. We had a few chats around different things, but the show really put a focal point around the effort to solidify the content and solidify the actual hypothesis into something that can be easily communicated. And it's only taken us 300 shows to do so. Only 6 years to communicate that. To be fair, though, of course, it only really translates to 600 hours, roughly. I mean, we had a few longer shows, but it's about 600 hours. And people ask me to explain, what I thought about things at the dinner party. And I said to them, look, it's really not possible. I can give you some things, and you probably won't like them and you make fun of me, and that's all good. But, in order to really understand what I'm talking about, I'll have to talk to you for 600 hours. Then we're on the same footing. That's a very long dinner party. Anyway, first things first. 1, there exists a power construct, a box, if you will, in which we all live. We are all indoctrinated early on to live within that box. This box is not of our choosing, yet most of us spend living their lives in that box. And most of us never know that we live inside that box. 2, the box is set up to self-perpetuate, to be self-perpetuating. Okay, it's a box which has only one purpose, is to extend its own existence. 3, agencies within the box have become privy to its existence and exploit the nature of the box for their own purposes. So the people in here with the box, oh, let's call them people. The people here sitting in the box with us that have become aware of its existence and have also been able to exploit the nature of the box for their own profit. 4. There is no physical escape from the box. There is no out as perceived within our 4-dimensional existence. When I talk about 4-dimensional, I'm talking about the 3 spatial dimensions we perceive, as well as the dimension of duration, commonly and incorrectly referred to as time. Duration. Without duration, there is no existence in this context. 5. Everything within the box, which we deem good and right, as it enables us to live in the box, is in fact the exact opposite. The exact opposite. 6. This knowledge is dangerous knowledge, and in the past, most who purported to know it, or were suspected of knowing, were persecuted and killed. It was knowledge handed from master to disciple, never written down, and it still isn't. It still isn't. I'm writing it down. Come for me if you like. 7. The knowledge at this point in time is slowly seeping into the general population, ever so slowly. Actually, at an increasing speed, because in my opinion, this is the time of the quickening. This is the time of, well, I guess it's the time we've all been waiting for. 8. We seem to be approaching critical mass. A rapture-like event, maybe, potentially, I'm not sure, which may free us from this box. But that's a part of the hypothesis I'll go into a bit later. 9. And I like to call the event the awareness cascade. That's what I call the event. The rapture, if you will. The best way to stop this awareness cascade is mass destruction and mass death, as it has happened in the past. Civilizations have been destroyed in the past. We had massive, extinction level events on this planet. Civilization have been wiped out, and we had to start from scratch. I don't think anybody could really argue that point. Not if we're honest with ourselves. There are, in fact, so many artifacts, physical things that exist that we cannot explain. We simply cannot explain how someone could have created them with the level of technology we allow them to have, right? It is simply staggering. 10. One must acknowledge the box before one can think of planning an escape. Yes. Now, I think that's true. It's a very interesting story. Plato's cave allegory. There's a cave in which, very many people lived, but they were living in it in such a way that they could only see one wall of the cave. They were bound, and they couldn't move their head around, so they were always looking at the wall. On the wall, there were shadows, and they were shadows of real things, and that's all the people ever saw, though, and they were not cognizant of the fact that those were shadows. To them, that was the real world, those shadows. And they couldn't, like I said, move their heads or escape from this cave. One day, one of them did escape and made it up into the real world. Looked around and goes, oh my goodness, this is crazy. What is going on here? We have only been looking at shadows. This is the real existence right here. I look around and I see so many different things. I have to go back and tell my fellow cave dwellers. So he did, and they promptly beat him to death. Yes, that's what would happen. We're not good at change. No, we really suck at change. That's us. That's the people. Now, let's start with one of the fundamental questions of our existence. Why do we die? Why do we die? Most of us think that death is something that has to occur. It's a natural thing. It's something that, nature has ordained. We must all die, or God, if you believe in God, or, some other deity, or spirits, or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but some higher power or something natural or evolution has decreed that death is a good thing, and we should all, suffer a physical, individual death at some point. Well, no. There are creatures that don't die at all. individually even, right? There's this jellyfish that ages, grows up, ages, blah, blah, and then at some point it just simply reverses the aging process until it goes back to its infancy, and then it all starts again. So these jellyfish, the individual jellyfish, not the jellyfish, family tree, if you will, but the individual jellyfish, therefore, unless it's eaten, lives forever. It lives forever, right? And other creatures live a lot longer than we do, right? And in comparison, a lot of creatures live a lot shorter lives than we do. Right? Imagine what it does to your psyche or your mindset if you could live a very long time, or if you lived a very, very short time. Like a mayfly lives a day, a couple days. So its entire life cycle happens in the space of, let's say, 24 hours, for argument's sake. To us, that's nothing. It's the blink of an eye, if you will. To the mayfly, that's its life. It's the sum of its experiences. It probably, it was born at midnight, and it's then lives its whole day, and then it's 11 p.m. the following day, and you go, oh, wow, whew, I'm just so tired. I'm in my ripe old age, and now I'm going off into the hunting grounds. So let's be clear on that. It's all a matter of perspective. It's a matter of perspective, and perspectives change. Now I'm going to quote something for you, right? From every tree in the garden did he grant them to eat, save but one. And that tree, in the center of the garden, was called the tree of life. And the snake said to Eve, eat of this fruit, and you will become as God and never die. Genesis 3:1. Let's be very clear. Let's be very, very clear about something. Since we are in a Judeo-Christian context, most of my listeners probably are, and I include Muslims as well because it's fundamentally the same creation story. We were not kicked out of the Garden of Eden because we ate from the tree of knowledge. No, we were kicked out of the Garden of Eden because they didn't want us to eat from the, as far as that story is concerned, right? I mean, you can draw many, 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 many parallels to many, 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 many other things. But suffice it to say, we, the human race, somehow got knowledge, right? Somehow, got hold of a whole bunch of knowledge, and that's in line with the legend of Prometheus. And by the way, Lucifer means bearer of light. Oh, is that true? Yes, it is. Lucifer means bearer of light. I think there's a very strong connection to the Prometheus legend there. There are other legends like that as well, where knowledge was given to us by the gods, stolen from other gods, and those gods were then punished because that was a bad thing. You can't give humans knowledge. That's crazy talk. And knowledge here is synonymous with light or fire, the flame of knowledge, things like that, right? You have to look beyond the literal and understand the context and the symbolism. Anyway, so there are many other parallels like that. In 1786, the average life expectancy was 24 years. 24 years. So if you put that yet again in context, if you, at 24, you probably already had children. You might, grandchildren, I doubt it. It's possible, I guess, but doubtful. But certainly, if that was the average, if you hit like 40, then you would be considered, a wise old man. Or if you hit 50 or 60, Methuselah, look at you. You have got the wisdom of the ages. 100 years later, in 1886, it doubled to 48. All of a sudden, people lived a lot longer. Of course, there are various advances in medicine, hygiene, food, general living conditions, education, all of that added to the extra years. Right now, or thereabouts anyway, a newborn can expect to live an average of 76 years. However, recent discovery in biology and other life sciences that has led scientists to predict that it could well grow into the triple digits, well above 100. And in fact, we know that that is a very achievable lifespan. There are many people that live beyond 100 years. With coming from completely different cultural backgrounds, having completely different diets and lifestyles. So we are designed, at the very least, to live beyond 100. But of course, we do ourselves harm with the food that we eat and the drugs that we take and the general lifestyles that we choose for ourselves. Okay? Now, and then scientists go on to say, well, maybe we don't have to die at all. Maybe we don't have to die at all. I'll get back to that in a second. I'm going to quote from Dr. Ronald Klutz of the American Academy of Anti-Aging. And this is what he has to say. Here in America are going to see their 100th birthday and beyond in excellent health. We're looking at lifespans for the baby boomers and the generation after the baby boomers of 120 to 150 years of age. He goes on to say, anti-aging medicine is not about stretching out the last years of life. It's stretching out the middle years of life and actually compressing those last few years of life so that diseases of aging happen very, very late in the life cycle, just before death, or they don't happen at all. So it's no good getting older and more decrepit as you get older. Who wants that? Nobody wants that. It is completely useless to be 2,000 years old and just a bag of bones, suffering from every possible ailment you can imagine. That's no good, no fun. Right? We want to be healthy if we live such a long life. Right? We want to be healthy and active and virile. That's what you want. I've spoken about this many times in the show. Immortality has silently been revealing itself to scientists like Dr. John Langmore of the University of Michigan's Department of Biology. Dr. Langmore and his group looked inside human cells at the very essence of human life, the DNA molecule. Specifically, Dr. Langmore looked at the tips of the DNA molecule, a previously overlooked part of the repeating called telomeres. These molecular chains have often been compared to the blank leaders on film and recording tape. Blank leaders, in case you're no longer familiar with the recording tape of it's a series of essentially through fast you movie. That's what happens. You get moving pictures. But of course, if anything gets damaged, then you can't see it anymore. It burns up or whatever. So this is a terrible thing. So what people did then, because most of the damage would happen at the end of the tape, they just created a whole length. So if you burned off the end, it didn't matter because it didn't have any content. It's fine. That's really what the telomeres are for our DNA. Okay, and let's actually let's look at the scientific explanation here. So, what exactly are telomeres? Telomeres are special essential DNA sequences at both ends of each chromosome. Each time chromosomes replicate, a small amount of the DNA at both ends is lost. Okay, a small amount of DNA at both ends is lost by an uncertain mechanism. It's just like you're taking a copy. The next copy is not as good as the last one. Because human telomeres shorten at a much faster rate than many lower organisms, we speculate that this telomere shortening probably has a beneficial effect for humans, namely mortality. Yeah, you heard me right, a beneficial effect for humans, mortality. The telomere hypothesis of aging postulates that as the telomeres naturally shorten during the lifetime of an individual, a signal or set of signals is given to the cells to cause the cells to cease growing, which is called senescence. At birth, human telomeres are about 10,000 base pairs long, but by 100 years of age, this has been reduced to about 5,000 base pairs. Telomerase is actually an enzyme, a catalytic protein, that is able to arrest or reverse this shortening process. Normally, telomerase is only used to increase the length of telomeres during the formation of sperm and perhaps eggs, thus ensuring that our offspring inherit long, young telomeres to propagate the species. Because think about it this way, right? All of your cells in your body would have telomeres that are shortened because you're older. Now, if you have children later in age, you would think that you therefore give them, within their DNA structure, a shortened telomeres because they're getting the old ones. Not so. Telomerase, right, actually does the opposite. Like telomerase lengthens the telomeres, again, protects the telomeres in sperm and eggs, so that our offspring can have a better start in life, right? They don't start with our old age, which is what would happen if telomerase didn't exist. Excuse me. I just had a sip of coffee. Oh, that's good. During the replication process, the spiral DNA molecule must split in half and reassemble a copy of itself. Protecting the vital DNA molecule from being copied out of sync, telomeres provide a kind of buffer zone where misalignments, which are inevitable, will not result in any of the important DNA code being lost. Perhaps the best analogy is to compare the telomeres to the white margin surrounding an important typewritten document. In this analogy, the printed text is the vital DNA code, while the white space is the blank telomeres. So you can do what you want to the white space, right? As long as you don't harm the text. Imagine that this paper is repeatedly slapped on a copy machine. A copy is made, and then that copy is used to make another copy, and so on and so forth. Each time the paper is subject to errors of alignment, and these errors accumulate. After enough copying, it is probable that the white space will diminish and some of the actual text will not be copied. That's what happens inside our cells. And that is the reason we get old and die. It's a built-in kill switch, guys and girls. I hope you're realizing this. It's a built-in kill switch. As any cell gets older, it is under attack by oxides and free radicals in the body and the environment. You know, in fact, the worst oxide is oxygen. Believe it or not. We survive as living beings because our cells have the ability to duplicate and replace themselves before being killed by these natural causes, right? Otherwise, we die very, 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 very quickly. Each time our cells divide, the DNA molecule makes a new copy of itself. But the procedure is very complex and not perfect. Usually a small portion of the DNA molecule is lost, misaligned, and not copied. Since errors are more frequent on the ends of a DNA molecule, this area, the telomere, does not contain any important DNA information, and the effect is insignificant. Telomeres, programmed to die, is the subheading. Scientists observe that the length of telomere chains becomes shorter as we grow older. Eventually, the telomeres become so short that cell replication produces lethal errors of missing pieces in the DNA sequence, ending the cell's ability to replace itself. This point, when the cell has lost a vital DNA code and cannot reproduce, is called the Hayflick limit. The Hayflick limit. It's a measure of how many times a cell can copy itself before it dies. That's the measure, Hayflick limit. Some cells in our body have a very high Hayflick limit. Cells that line the inside of your mouth and intestines, for example, are constantly being worn away and replaced. Indeed, these cells appear to have the ability to regrow telomeres even in aged bodies. Scientists were curious why some cells shut down telomere growth with age and some do not. Dr. Langmore used physical, biochemical, and genetic techniques to study the structure and function of telomeres. His group developed a cell-free system to reconstitute functional model telomeres using synthetic DNA, because people don't like when you chop them up too much. That's what happens. And studied the mechanism by which telomeres normally stabilize chromosomes and how shortening of the telomeres could cause instability. The protein factors responsible for stabilizing the ends of chromosomes are being identified, cloned, and studied. Electron microscopy is used to directly visualize the structure of the model telomeres. Dr. Langmore's group used new enzymatic assays to determine the structure of telomere DNA in normal and abnormal cells grown in vivo and in vitro, in order to address specific hypotheses about the role of telomeres in aging and cancer. Scientists have discovered an important enzyme that can turn the telomere production on the DNA molecule on and off. It's called telomerase, as we just learned. Not surprisingly, it seems that as we get older, the amount of telomerase in our cells decreases. Interesting. The cancer problem. There's the cancer problem. And I'm going to read it out to you, and then I will tell you what I think. Usually, if a cell makes an error in copying itself, the error will prevent the cell from duplicating itself in the future. So the mistake is limited, like a failsafe, right? But with cancer, cells with error somehow turn on the production of telomerase and make the mutant cell immortal. Let me say that again. But with cancer, cells with error somehow turn on the production of telomerase. And make the mutant cell immortal. Turning on telomerase makes the cell immortal. Now, aberrant cells can reproduce unchecked and outlive normal cells. This is the process that creates tumors. Since we all have mutant precancerous cells in our bodies, nature has decided to shut off the telomerase as we age, thus preventing these mutant cells from growing telomeres. It's a kind of programmed death, a trade-off to reduce our lifespan in order to save us from being riddled with tumors. Nevertheless, some precancerous cells manage to reactivate their telomeres, and this has caused the research to focus more on blocking telomere production rather than trying to extend it. Now, let me put it this way. The cancer cells switch telomerase back on. Okay? It is a flawed logical leap to say that if your telomerase is on, you will get cancer. I don't think that follows. I really do not. I'll get a lot of hate for that, I'm sure. But the cancer cells turn it back on. It's not the other way around. If you could telomerase happen, I got it on my body, I get cancer. No, it's the other way around. You get cancer, and then the cancer cell, bang, switches it back on to make itself immortal. It's not like there's all this telomerase, here all over the place and, making cancer cells. That is not what's happening. Okay? Anti-cancer researchers believe that by introducing a molecule to block this groove, the telomerase would become unable to attach itself to the DNA and thereby limit the length of telomere production. While this work holds hope for stopping tumor cells from reproducing forever, it does little to extend healthy cells from being rejuvenated. However, if the molecular blocker could specifically target only cancerous cells without blocking telomerase activity in healthy cells, it could be a step towards human life extension if and when a pharmaceutical can be developed that activates telomerase in the human body. All right? So let's look at this again just for a second, though. We don't have to block telomerase. We have to block telomerase in cancer cells. Yes, absolutely. But not in other cells. In fact, we should switch it back on. We should switch telomerase back on as quickly as possible. Telomerase does not equal cancer. Cancer equals telomerase, though. Okay? A equals B. And, but B must not necessarily equal C. So, there is no, in my opinion, good reason or good grounding to say that telomerase causes cancer. Yes, if you have cancer, you should switch off the telomerase in your cancer cells. 100%, no argument. Because it was the cancer cell that switched it on. Okay? But if telomerase were available to you, like, switched on in your body, in my opinion, cancers would not arise because you're preventing the copying process from deteriorating. One of the causes of cancer, right? Because, you get errors in your cells, and these errors lead to cancer. Could, in other cases, there are toxins, like nicotine, alcohol. They can certainly, lead to cell mutations, which can lead to cancer. Okay. But if the telomerase was on, in my opinion, it would protect the copying process, making it far less likely that we would get cancer. Okay. That's what I think. Now, in essence, what we have just shared with you, or what I just read out to you, means that we have a built-in kill switch. Why do we have a built-in kill switch? Asks Mackie, and gets no answer because he's by himself. Well, we'll get to that. Now, how about the age of humanity at large? Scientifically accepted as about 200,000 years. That's where we say, Homo sapiens, or our close ancestors, first reared their head. 200,000 years. with similar capabilities to what we have today. You know what? Let's assume 100,000 years. So we've been around like this for 100,000 years. I'm just making that assumption. Boom, right there. Now, if you look at it dispassionately, unemotive, that's enough time for 5 civilizations minimum, like ours or similar, to have existed. Right? Well, how long did it take us to get where we are? Well, our written records go back at best 5,000 years. Okay? The footprint of our civilization, you know, as we're digging stuff up, is now extending, 10, 15, 20,000 years into the past. Okay? So, but for all intents and purposes, with the advent of Babylon and, the empires of, in essentially what is the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is today Syria, Iraq, Iran, those civilizations gave rise to a lot of us, similar with the Harappan cultures, the Chinese civilization, some of the South American civilization, the African civilizations. Push it back 10,000 years if you want, right? But before that, we were pretty much at rock bottom. We had to start from scratch. Hunter-gatherers, very, in today's terms, we lived a fairly primitive life. Probably a lot happier, but not quite as advanced, technologically speaking, in the last, 10, 15,000 years. And then something happened, and we started developing, and we invented things, and the fire and the wheel, that was all good. We had roads and cities and all that wonderful stuff, and here we are today, choking in our own excrement. But there are of course questions around that as well. I quickly want to go into those before I go on. Why did we develop cities? What question were we trying to answer? What question were we trying to answer? I can give you the answer to the question of cities. So if someone goes, cities? The answer is agriculture and domestication. That's the answer. But what was the question that led to the rise of cities? So you have to ask yourself, well, what does a city do for us? What is the benefit of a city? Well, a city is stationary. That so it doesn't go anywhere. That gives you stability and permanence. That's good. You can build things around a city that also have permanence. And if you have a city near a place that you want to be at, like a river, a gold mine, a coal mine, a forest, whatever, you can exploit that resource. So it makes sense to have a city if you want to be mining gold, for argument's sake. I'm not saying that's what we did, just as an argument, as a thought construct. So a city requires something that requires permanence, right? And legend has it that we came about, and cities came about in order to mine gold. Yes, that's right, or other precious metals and minerals, but specifically gold. And it makes sense, because before that we were hunter-gatherers running around a lot. If anybody came along and wanted to do something like mining gold, hunter-gatherers will go to you, what for? Why would I spend my day digging around in the dirt, underground, not seeing the sun, not feeling the wind on my face, not hunting, not eating fresh meat? Why am I doing that? Excuse me? I don't get it. And they would be right. It makes absolutely no sense. Why would you do that? It's just plain silly. But clearly somebody wanted that to happen. And they invented cities. And there they were. The problem then that we had was, cities. How do we feed all these people? And the answer, of course, was agriculture and domestication. Now, people always say, we just invented and developed grains, and we domesticated, cattle and so forth. Look, sure. But, and this is really the thing here, chicken and egg type of thing. You can't have a city unless you have a steady food supply. And you really don't have a steady food supply unless you've got some kind of controlled mechanism to provide that food. And agriculture and domestication are those mechanisms. So you would think that agriculture and domestication had to, come before the cities in order for the cities to be enabled. But why would you bother about agriculture and domestication if you're a hunter-gatherer? Like I said, why do I want to be here digging in the dirt when I can, be out there doing my own thing? So there must have been a very strong, compelling reason to get cities started. The other thing about agriculture and domestication is that it takes very, very long. So somebody 10,000 years ago looked at a blade of grass and thought, ooh, black forest cherry cake, right? And at a cow and thought, ooh, blue vein cheese. So to put it in perspective, the grass that you see everywhere, that's how our grains all started. All our grains are grass. And it took a lot of doing before they came to be the crop that we have today. Corn, wheat, rye, sorghum, spelt, rice, I don't care what it is. It all is grass. And I am astonished by the person that stood there in the savannah or prairie or tundra and looked at grass and thought bread. I'm stupefied by that person's clear-sighted future vision, because it would have taken hundreds of years to domesticate that grass into something even half worthwhile eating, and something that could sustain a population. So that's a big problem for me. The thing is, the expert all dismiss it. I mean, in school we're taught, oh well, that's what happened. Well, yeah, something happened clearly, but please look at it from a logical point of view. It would have taken a very long time and a lot of dedication and foresight to domesticate grass. A lot. Because there were nuts and tubers and there was game, fishing, probably, but, the climate changed. Okay, but if the climate changed, why do we now all of a sudden think that farming is a good idea? Okay, if the natural plants can't make it, why do we think farming plants make it? And why do we think that the domestication of these plants will lead anywhere? Someone told us about this. Someone instigated it. Someone made us do it or gave it to us. I'm not saying who yet. That'll come a little bit later in the hypothesis. It is just astounding to me that we just take these things, okay, domestication. Yeah, that makes sense. The agricultural revolution. Yeah. And not only that, everywhere. In Asia, they cultivate rice. In South America, they cultivate maize or corn, as you call it. In Europe, it's wheat and rye, the ancient grains like spelt and so forth. And you're thinking, really? So it happened everywhere at the same time, roughly, and we all now are completely dependent upon that food supply, by the way. Okay. So to me, this is one of the greatest mysteries, along with flowering plants. Flowering plants and agriculture are completely mysterious to me. Okay? Because again, the answer to the question of cities is agriculture. What was the question that cities was an answer to? And I think it might have been gold mining, right? Or some kind of operation that required you to be in one place. Okay? So that's just something very quickly aside here. There are genetic bottlenecks in humans, and we've spoken about these at length as well. Some very interesting stuff, by the way. The Toba super eruption, the youngest Toba Tuff, or simply YTT2, was a super volcanic eruption that occurred sometime between 69,000 and 77,000 years ago at the site of present-day Lake Toba, which is in Sumatra in Indonesia. It is recognized as one of the Earth's largest known eruptions. The related catastrophe hypothesis holds that this event caused a global volcanic winter of 6 to 10 years and possibly a 1,000-year-long cooling episode. That's pretty hefty. If you want to talk about climate change, it's right up there, guys. The Toba catastrophe theory suggests that a bottleneck of the human population occurred circa, roughly, 70,000 years ago, reducing the total human population to about 15,000 individuals when Toba erupted and triggered a major environmental change, including a volcanic winter. The theory is based on geological evidence for sudden climate change at that time and for coalescence of some genes, including mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome, and some nuclear genes, as well as the relatively low level of genetic variation among present-day humans. Let me repeat the last bit. As well as the relatively low level of genetic variation among present-day humans. Let me just very, very quickly say something about that. There are legends about blue-faced humans and yellow-faced humans, and I don't mean Asian, I mean actually yellow, red-faced as well, right? So, like, you know, really prominent colors of skin coloring. Humans that had maybe only the one eye, humans with horns, humans with claws, humans with 6 fingers and 6 toes, very big humans, very small humans. Now, though, we're seeing more and more of that coming to light. For the longest time, I've maintained, and Dave was right with me there, that the human experience was a lot more diverse in times gone past. There were a lot more different human species around, completely interbreedable, right? So we all share the same genetic ancestry, if you will. But the variation of what we like to call humans was much greater than it is today, in every possible. In the coloring, in the hair, in the height, in the girth, in the strength, and so forth. What we see today is a positive comparison. Hello, and you're back with Dave and Mackie's Shiny Set Out. My apologies, I was talking into the break, I didn't hear it, so I do apologize for that. Please do donate if you can. This is Listener Funded Radio. It is an awesome platform. It allows you to interact as well. The chat is open, by the way. That's how I knew I was talking over the break. It's a great little helper there. But no, seriously, if you like the content and you have an inquisitive mind, maybe you want to do your own show. Get in touch with Nighthawk if you've got something to say. You know, if you have a point of view and you've done the research, maybe you're the right person. Maybe you're the person that will lead us into the future. Who knows? You know, revolutionaries are born every day. And again, the new radio station is revolution.radio. Revolution.radio. It's really, very neat. Very, very neat. Thank you, Omega Logos. I actually heard the last bit of the of the break, which is odd. So technology is a wonderful thing. I'm doing this on Skype, by the way. Skype is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Well, it used to be before Microsoft bought it. Anyway, it's all good. It's all good. Yes, as I was saying, I think the human race was a lot more diverse back in the day when we before the catastrophe. In any event, now the Toba catastrophe, as I said, happened some 70,000 years ago, I think, and the effect it had on us, for example, was that according to one hypothesis, is that the human mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from your mother, and the Y chromosome DNA, which is inherited from your father, coalesce, at around 140,000 and 60,000 years ago, respectively. This suggests that a female line ancestor of all present-day humans traces back to a single female, which we like to call the mitochondrial Eve, at around 140,000 years ago, and the male line to a single male, the Y chromosomal Adam, to about 60 to 90,000 years ago. However, such coalescence does not necessarily indicate a population bottleneck, because mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome DNA are only a small part of the human genome and are atypical in that they're inherited exclusively through the mother or through the father, respectively. Most genes are inherited randomly from either the father or the mother, thus cannot be traced to either matrilineal or patrilineal ancestry. Other genes display coalescence point from 2 million to 60,000 years ago, thus casting doubt on the existence of recent and strong bottlenecks. Other possible explanations for limited genetic variation among today's humans rather than a catastrophic environmental change. This would be consistent with suggestions that in sub-Saharan Africa, human populations dropped to as low as 2,000 individuals for perhaps as long as 100,000 years before numbers began to increase again in the late Stone Age. Now, to me, that all seems a little forced as an explanation. But what it says here is that there were several coalescence points. So mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosomal DNA, 140,000 and roughly 70,000 years ago, respectively. Other genes display coalescence points about 2 million or 60,000 years ago. In my mind, that means there were several events that caused this bottleneck. Several events, right? Or several bottlenecks, if you will. Okay, that reduced our breeding populations quite significantly. Again, this is in line with the hypothesis, which states that every now and again, our numbers are culled on purpose to prevent the awareness cascade. But again, we will talk more about it a bit later. Genetic bottlenecks in other mammals. So other mammals have genetic bottlenecks as well. Yes, they do. Some evidence points to genetic bottlenecks in other mammals, or animals in fact, in the wake of the Toba eruption. The population of the Eastern African chimpanzee, Bornean orangutan, Central Indian macaque, the cheetah, the tiger, and the separation of the nuclear gene pools of eastern and western lowland gorillas all recovered from very low numbers around 70,000 years ago. This does not mean that humanity started at that point in time, though it might, but rather that human variety was severely curtailed. Maybe there were many more species, like I said earlier, maybe blue-skinned, maybe green, maybe some that were one-eyed, maybe some that were very large, while others might have been very, very small. We now have ample proof that the human family was much more diverse, even as little as 10,000 years ago. A mysterious small human species coexisted with modern man in China until at least 10,500 years ago, scientists announced recently, based on an analysis of an anomalous thigh bone found in a cave. The discovery brings the number of human species coexisting until very recently to 3. Us, Homo sapiens sapiens, that new one I just mentioned, and the so-called hobbit, or Homo floresiensis, that survived on the Indonesian island of Flores until at least 13. Put in perspective, at the same time when saber-toothed tigers and mammoths were going extinct in the late Ice Age, and agriculture was beginning to develop, and I still don't know why, in the Levant is the land of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Syria, Iran, Iraq today. And at least 3 were roaming the planet. The thigh bone found in Red Deer Cave in Yunnan province is about 14,000 years old and is substantially different from a modern man's. Professor Darren Curnow of the University of New South Wales and Professor Ji Zheping of the Yunnan Institute of Cultural Philosophy, other remains from the same mysterious species found nearby dates to 10,500 years ago. This thigh bone is more similar to those possessed by Homo habilis and early Homo erectus, which predated man by some 1.5 million years, than to man itself. Wow. That's all I can say. Interestingly, to stay on topic, the book Forbidden Archaeology, which I have and which is brilliant, by the way, by Cremo and compatriots, as well as Devolution, which is another book by him, highlight the possibility that humanity might be a great deal older. But both works are usually derided by mainstream science, even though their scholarly qualities are not questioned. This is really odd. So nobody questions the scholarship that went into producing these books. The research, the discipline, the scientific method, and all that wonderful stuff. But they completely dismiss the findings of the book. Right? What? Is that weird? I think it's weird. Now, Kramer and allies cite a great many anomalies in the fossil record and show documented evidence of artifacts and tools and Homo sapiens bones appearing in geological strata they should not. They should not. So to give you a bit more context, they found artifacts like, or they've got reports of artifacts being found in layers that are hundreds of millions of years old. Yeah, they found bowls, vases. Yeah, they found bones, skeletal remains, again, tens of millions of years old, of Homo sapiens. So there's a lot of evidence they uncovered, which is completely ignored and dismissed by mainstream science. Archaeology, in this case, of course. So you say, well, Mackie, that's okay, because obviously, if that's the case, then there is no good reason to believe that any of this is true. Because science, foremost, wants to, find out more things, find out new things, and discover things, and it's completely unbiased, and only wants to increase our knowledge. That's what science does, Mackie. That's what it does. And I go, okay, that's interesting. So you're saying to me there's no bias out in the world, there's no filter, no academic filter, none of that. No, people tell me, no. Science reigns supreme and is just there to, make us know more stuff, Mackie. Right. Okay. So how about this then? How about, I've got examples that when the dating is not in line with what the establishment wants, the offending scientist either self-censors or is barred from the scientific community. And I'm told, no, that's not correct, Mackie. That doesn't happen. Oh, okay, right. So let me tell you this. There's a fairly high-profile case of Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre. And she was a geologist working for the U.S. Geological Survey, who was dispatched to an archaeological site in Mexico to date a group of artifacts in the 1970s. This travesty also illustrates how far established scientists will go to guard orthodox tenets, theories. McIntyre used state-of-the-art equipment and backed up her results by using 4 different methods. But her results were off the chart. The lead archaeologist of that expedition expected a date of 25,000 years or less. Right? That is in line with what we think happened in the Americas as far as human populations is concerned. However, the geologist's finding was 250,000 years or more. Significantly different from what was expected. Yeah. These controversial findings are orders of magnitude older than the scientific consensus for habitation of the New World, which generally traces widespread human migration to the New World to 13 to 16,000 years before the present. So, but 13 to 16,000 years before now is when we believe humans entered the Americas. The findings at Hueyatlaco have mostly been repudiated by the larger scientific community and have seen only occasional discussion in the literature. The figure of 25,000 years or less was critical to the Bering Strait crossing theory, and it was the motivation behind the head archaeologist tossing Steen McIntyre's results in the circular file, that's a trash bin in case you're wondering, and asking for a new series of dating tests. This sort of reaction does not occur when dates match the expected chronological model that supports accepted theories. So, again, 2 things here. One, the prevailing theory was, Bering Strait was crossed 25,000 years ago. Bing, that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much. Your result doesn't conform with that, therefore you're wrong. I don't care what the science says. I don't care what the findings are. Completely irrelevant. Your findings contradict what I know to be true. The theory of the Bering Strait crossing theory, what I know, right? Of course, a lot of scientists when they come to these crossroads, would choose to self-censor, because they know what the theories are. They know what the accepted, thought constructs are. Therefore, when they find something that is completely out of the ordinary, they go, oh, yeah, let's just falsify these results a little bit so I can keep my tenure and feed my children. Thank you very much. Not so Steen McIntyre. She was given a chance to retract her conclusions, but she refused. Because this is what it is, guys. The science doesn't lie, she said. She found it hard thereafter to get her papers published, and she lost a teaching job at an American university. And I want to be clear here. These are the findings. Biostratigraphic researcher Sam Van Lanningham has published 2 peer-reviewed analyses that confirm the earlier findings of about 250,000 years before the present for the tool-bearing strata at Hayatlaco. His 2004 analysis found that Hayatlaco samples could be dated to the Sangamonian interglacial period, which is about 80,000 to 200,000 years ago from before today, by the presence of multiple diatom species, one of which first appeared during this era, and others that went extinct by the era's end. Diatoms are little tiny creatures. Van Lanningham's 2006 paper refined and reconfirmed his 2004 findings. So 30 years, almost 40 years, after Steen McIntyre made her statements, published her findings, her research and her methodology as well as her findings are completely vindicated, right? 2 separate analyses found that she was right. Her analysis was correct. The date was 250,000 years ago, not the expected 25,000 years ago. There was no apology that I know of. Textbooks haven't been rewritten, okay, because people still have a vested interest in controlling the knowledge. Okay, and this is not even a massively sinister thing at this point, right? This is just self-interest. Now, of course, it does play into the elite's hands, because we are denied this knowledge that we humans are a lot older than we are and have been doing interesting things for a lot longer than they acknowledge. I mean, imagine if there was evidence for human habitation in the Americas 250,000 years ago. You have to rewrite everything. Where are these people? What happened to them? Where are these lost cultures? Right? There's no record of these people. None. But clearly, the human race was spread across the entire globe back then. And I maintain, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, I maintain that we are, as a species, a lot older than we're told. Plus, we achieved levels of sophistication and technology superior, far superior to what we have today. We are not the pinnacle. Our civilization is not the pinnacle. The only people that have a problem with that is usually people in the West. If you go to India, they'll tell you, yeah, of course, Mackie, well, you're crazy. Of course, that's not, we know that. Thank you very much. There are cycles, People, and the human race goes through destruction cycles, and, we have to start again from scratch. That's what happens. Yeah, we got Vimanas, flying machines. Yeah. We had nuclear-like weapons, burning brighter than 1,000 suns, is completely destroying entire peoples. Yeah. We look, you can read our Vedas, the Mahabharata, for example. Read it and see, it's all there. But of course, all of these writings of other civilizations by the Western experts are completely dismissed as fairy tales and hocus pocus. Entirely dismissed. Any evidence of ancient technology, like voice-activated doors, open sesame, flying carpets, or any flying machine for that matter. That's crazy talk, Mackie. That's no. You can't do that. It's just impossible. No. What is impossible is to deny the truth of it. How did we move 1,000-ton stone blocks And more to the point, how did the Romans do it? Right? And when we know very clearly that they couldn't, but we'll get to that later as well. There are so many things wrong with what we think we know and the story we're being told. This false veneer we are given in school and at university. Okay, and then God forbid you should try to question any of this. God forbid you should try to form your own opinion and maybe shine a light into a dark corner, like so Steen McIntyre, Virginia Steen McIntyre, Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre, a geologist, by the way. She didn't go out there on a crusade to change the world. She wasn't a conspiracy theorist. That wasn't her thing. She was an established scientist. She had a teaching position. She had no intention to overthrow the establishment. She just followed her science. And her science found, well, this is what it is. I got to publish it. Naively as she was, and now of course she's been vindicated by Sam Van Lanningham twice. But again, no apologies. So what do we do with that information? Do we just ignore that? Because I use it in my arguments all the time. I say, guys, there is a scientific filter. This is actually a very famous case that actually happened. It happens every year a lot. These people self-censor because they don't want to be in the position that Virginia's in. They don't want to be in that position, right? That's really the lesson to take away here. That most people want to avoid this kind of confrontation because people don't like confrontation. They certainly don't like to lose their job. Okay. Now, there's a very interesting other example here. I love this one. This is the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian acknowledges a problem. It's priceless. In 1987, paleontologist Jerry McDonald discovered a wide variety of fossilized tracks from several different species of animals and birds, located in the Permian strata. Among the various fossilized foot. What? However, the Permian strata has been dated from 290 to 248 million years ago. Million, not thousand, million. So roughly 298 million years before we were meant to have existed. Millions of years before animals, birds, dinosaurs, and yes, man was supposed to have existed. How, then, can these prints be explained? And this is priceless. In July 1992, the Smithsonian Magazine had an article on these tracks called Petrified Footprints, a puzzling parade of Permian beasts. Somebody really likes the alliterations. The magazine acknowledged the mystery, acknowledging what paleontologists like to call problematic. It described what appeared to be large mammal and bird tracks that evolved long after the Permian period, yet these tracks are clearly Permian. While it is commendable that MacDonald and the Smithsonian clearly acknowledged the existence of these tracks, in a strata, in fact, that contradicts the current evolutionary theory, it is noteworthy that they highlight only the mammal and bird prints and don't mention the human footprint found with them. Interestingly enough, since these tracks have been discovered, evolutionists have not, nor have they tried to argue that the footprint isn't human. Often they claim that, yes, it's a print that just looks like a human footprint. They haven't said anything about it. Their silence, in fact, is deafening. Their silence is deafening. Wow. So we've had two examples here, very pointed examples of one, knowledge filters, but secondly also, more than a knowledge filter, the complete denial of something. These tracks, I mean, the tracks are there physically. Now, you can argue until you blow in the face about the dating that Steen McIntyre undertook. And he says, dating is, blah, blah, there's a problem with it, and, it doesn't work. And diatoms, well, maybe we got that wrong. Maybe they lived a lot in a different time to what we think they did, and I make all these arguments. Sure enough, but these are prints, fossilized, like prints that have turned to stone in the intervening period, and in a strata that is acknowledged by everybody to be Permian. Now, either that's wrong, they're not Permian, right? In which case a lot of scientists are wrong about that, or they are Permian, in which case they're wrong about the evolution of all these animals and humans. Either way, someone is wrong about something. But because that can't be, we can't acknowledge that wrongness because someone's 10 years on the line here, we simply don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. No, silence, no more. Let's go and do something else. Let's play. Let's play with the Hadron Collider. Let's do that. I personally, honestly, find that astounding. Okay, I find. I'm sorry, I'm speechless. It's staggering. If just internalize it, think about it, right, and get back to me on your thoughts. Now, having said that, there are problems with dating, right? So one of the issues we have today is well, how do we really know how old something is? Well, that's that's really, really tough. So there are different types of dating that we use. I want to quickly explain that so you understand the complexity as well. So there's absolute dating and there's relative dating. So absolute dating, okay, I'm going to talk about now. That's when you use radioisotopes, okay. But there are three critical assumptions when it comes to radioisotope dating. And meaning a radioisotope is a particle which has a certain decay rate, meaning it loses half of its radioactivity over a certain amount of time. So, for example, there's a radioisotope that loses half of its radioactivity over 40,000 years. So, if you find one, so find a material, you measure the radioisotope, and okay, I know this particular sample is 40,000 years old because it has this much radioactivity, for example. Okay. Now, there are three assumptions, critical assumptions, that need to be observed when doing this. One, the initial conditions of the rock samples are accurately known. Okay, 100%. So you have to know that. Okay, one. Two, the amount of parent or daughter elements in the sample has not been altered by processes other than radioactive decay. Three, the decay rate, or the half-life I just mentioned, of the parent isotope has remained constant since the rock was formed. Now you can see there are many issues with these assumptions, because what if there was a strong bombardment of radiation from outer space? I don't know, a supernova, for example, or some other event, or even an impact on the Earth or something, which we know there have been many. Or what if our own sun had a flare and bathed us in radiation, thereby altering the radioisotopes within the rock? I mean, how do you account for that, right? Now I do highly recommend the books Forbidden Archaeology and Devolution to get a different point of view to the accepted scientific stance. Yes, they are inspired by Hindu philosophy. I won't lie about that, but so what? I mean, our thinking is inspired by Western philosophy, Descartes, Newton, and so forth. So it's just another way of looking at the world. So just read the books and then see what you think. I think the research done in them is quite astounding. So let's just gather for a quick data point at this juncture. Said earlier, Eastern it is years ago, which is the advent of our hominid ancestors. So now, having said all of that, there seems to be, and we have discussed, ample evidence high civilizations, similar in capability to our own, and some quite likely more advanced, albeit displaying different characteristics, such as different technologies and different energy sources and so forth. So in fact, so different that today we have no idea how certain things were done. We just don't know it. Anecdotally, people keep referring to a acoustic or sound-based technology, and there are some, stories, again purely anecdotal, that come to us from different areas in the world. One from the Himalayas, for example, where a traveler witnessed monks using instruments and chants to levitate a boulder or rock up a sheer cliff wall to a building site. And of course, if you again, I like to quote the Bible because it is full of little morsels like this. And there's the story of the walls of Jericho, where, for all intents and purposes, some kind of sonic weapon was used to break down or destroy the wall. And there are many other similar stories. So it seems that whatever civilizations have existed before us, they didn't all walk down the fossil fuel track, internal combustion engine kind of route. They found different ways to bring about industry and technology and so forth. In ways that today we find hard to conceive of. Doesn't mean they were better or they were worse. They were just different. In a similar way, maybe to give you an analogy here. So flight. Look at flight and how nature or someone has solved the problem of flight. If you look at a bird, it's very clear, that it's a lightweight skeleton, feathers, all of it buoyancy, and a bird flies by flapping its wings. An insect flies in a very different way. It's got wings, yes, but they're no feathers. And the whole insect is very lightweight, and it's a very rapid movement of those wings, even more rapid than the bird that propels the insect. A bat, yet again, is a slightly different flyer as well. More of a glider, really, more or less. But it still flies in a flapping motion, but no feathers in this instance. So in this case, nature has found ways to express flight. And in a similar way, humans would express technology and advancement and civilization in different ways, in ways that we would find very difficult to understand. I mean, even if we look at just our culture today, if we travel, we will come across many cultures, even today, where where we will come upon practices and rituals that we will find very strange, maybe even frightening or abhorrent, even within like the present day context. So we're all contemporaries, but we're all very different. Now imagine a culture that developed 20,000 years away from us with no touch points. Imagine how strange that would be, or must seem. Yeah, it's almost inconceivable of how these people would have thought. And then, of course, there's the barrier of language as well. We for the most part, we have no idea what these ancient languages say. And some of the scripts that we do find are completely lost to us. We just we don't have a Rosetta Stone for every ancient language. It'd be great if we did, but we don't. Right? So we are we're reduced to speculation and some other sources. I mean, and I like to go to mythology. Right? I mean, there's the physical evidence, yes, but I like to go to mythology because mythology is a very important part of any culture, and it hands down knowledge. It hands down knowledge to us from the past. And people used to take this very seriously. Oral traditions were very, very serious. Before people started writing, you had to learn these things off by heart. People learned entire Vedas, like this would equate to hundreds of books these days by heart, and they were drilled and drilled and drilled. And their memories were prodigious. Like their memories were astounding. And that's all they did. That was their job within the tribe or the clan or the nation to remember these things, right? And then, of course, had writing and all that come along. But in the course of our history, we've lost so much writing as well. We lost so many books. The Library of Alexandria, all the codices that were burned by the Catholic Church in the Americas. It's millions of books that we have completely lost. Books that were old then, hundreds or thousands of years ago, written in languages that were old then, maybe dead then, right? That we only have rudimentary knowledge of today. So we've lost a lot of knowledge, is really my point here. Now, let's look at the pyramids. They're perfectly aligned to the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west. They have virtually no subsidence. Now, if you build a house today, in 100 years, I think in Australia the standard is it can subside by 10 centimeters. That means it sinks into the ground 10 centimeters, right? So that's an acceptable standard in 100 years. The pyramids don't subside at all, pretty much. So whoever built them and wherever they built them, it's the perfect location because it's on bedrock. They found the right place, and there has been no subsidence at all. Well, virtually none. There are no inscriptions inside the pyramids, and the ones that exist are likely fake, because the only cartouche found in the pyramid spelling Khufu's name is a fake, recognizable through a spelling mistake. Nobody would misspell the name of a god king, even if it's only graffiti. It just wouldn't happen. The name was not written with the correct signs: sieve, quail, viper, quail, which are representing the consonants. K, wu, f, wu, Khufu. Okay. It had a solar disk, a ray at the beginning, instead the sieve, K. Okay. A circle with several horizontal lines, a circle with single dot in the middle was written there. The name in the pyramid thus is spoken Re-Ufu, not Khufu, but Re-Ufu. This mistake, which is unthinkable for ancient Egyptian writers, is explainable on the background of 1837. In that year, an academic book about hieroglyphics had been published. It was called the Materia Hieroglyphica, in which the name of Khufu was written with a mistake. The lines of the sieve were so close together that they appeared in the print like a massive disk, another way of writing Ray. And it is known that Weiss had this book with him on his excavation. So it was Weiss, actually, that found this, and he wanted to be famous, that found the cartouche. Now, obviously, the the thought here is that the cartouche was put there by someone at that time. The whole 1837 expedition stood under a bad sign. The money had run out, and nothing what had been hoped for had been achieved. So a member of the expedition planned to spice up the results, and he went into the new discovered chambers the moment the blast fumes had vanished, and he painted, equipped with the fatal misprint from the book, some texts to the walls. And there he painted the name Khufu, as he found it in the book, with a solar disk and not with a sieve. The faker, maybe J.R. Hill, also made another mistake. Instead of hieroglyphics, he used a letter system only used for papyri, a handwriting called hieratics. Okay, so we're none the wiser about the pyramids, and the things we do know about the pyramids, we don't really know about the pyramids, because it wasn't Khufu who built it. He cleaned it up. He restored it, as he said himself. Right? Because they were ancient when he was around. There were ancient monuments when he was around. He did not build any of it. And please look at the Sphinx just for a second. You might never have seen the Sphinx. Look at a picture, though, at a photograph, when it's not covered in sand. And then compare it to the Sphinxes you buy in all the tourist shops in Cairo and everywhere else in the world. The Sphinx you buy in the tourist shop is perfectly proportionate. So the human head is in perfect proportion to the lion body, which is, what you should expect. If you look at the actual Sphinx, the lion body, in proportion to the head, is far larger. Right? The lion or the Sphinx looks like it suffers from microencephaly, like a microhead. It is clear to me, and you can hate me for it, but it's clear to me that the Sphinx's head was recarved. I do not pretend to know what it initially was. Most likely a lion's head, but it was not the head that we have today. Okay. there is absolutely no proportionality between the head and the body. Full stop. And people will say, oh, it was such a long time ago and people didn't know this and people didn't know that. So let's be very clear here. They built the pyramids with such precision that we are hard-pressed to equal it today. And they cannot have a proportionally or anatomically correct sphinx? Really? Really? I'm sorry. I'm not going there because it's a nonsensical discussion. More so, what we're finding as well all over the world are megalithic structures. Everywhere. Everywhere. Not just in Peru. We find these massive stone constructions everywhere in the world. And in my opinion, one of the most famous ones is the Baalbek temple I mentioned earlier in Lebanon, in the Bekaa Valley. In fact, it's a platform on which the Temple of Jupiter stands. I'm not disputing that the Temple of Jupiter was built by the Romans. Absolutely. The Romans built the Temple of Jupiter. They did not build the platform on which the Temple of Jupiter was built. That platform predates the Jupiter temple by, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of years. I don't know. But they are not constructed at the same time. If you look at pictures, you can see the quality of the stone, the ancientness, if that's a word, the antiquity of the stone of the platforms, of the platform rather, in comparison to the stones used in the actual Jupiter temple itself. Not only that, the Romans had no way of cutting, transporting, and lifting these 3 1,000-ton monoliths. In fact, they have now found an additional couple of monoliths of the same weight in quarries, where those ones would have come from, half finished. One was finished, another one was half finished, there's another one half. Must have been some kind of tools down event at some point. Okay, you don't start this kind of work unless you find some kind of flaw in it, maybe, and then just walk away. It's just, the scale of this stone masonry is just staggering. It really dwarfs a human being. I urge you to look at pictures if you can. Not only that, though, they lifted those stones to what would be equivalent to probably the second or third story of this platform, which leads to another thing, which is the why. Forget the how. Clearly it was done. Obviously it was done. But why would you do it? Right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Economically, technologically, from a pure effort point of view, it makes no sense. It would make a lot more sense to use much smaller stones. They're easier to maneuver. They're easier to move around, to lift up, to do all kinds of things with, even if they still weigh, 50 tons or whatever, like in the pyramid. Why would you even consider using 1,000-ton stones? Unless, of course, it's not a thing to you. It's just what we do. It's like opening a Coke bottle. Thank you very much. So, we are dealing with very different mindsets here when we look back in the past. Because to them it might have just been, like I said, a thing like, that's what we do. And I need these 3 1,000-ton stone blocks there for structural reasons or whatever. I just need them there. And I can do it. So for me, it's not a thing. It's like, when you for my daughters are young. I got little kids. And I can lift very heavy things. And they can't. So they see me doing these things. For me, an easy task because I don't even think about it. Yeah, I lift it over here like a bike or a box or whatever. Like shopping bags. They can't because the bag is too heavy. I don't think about it, but they can't do it. Right? So for me, it's just a thing that I do. And for them, it would be a concerted effort. They would have to come up with some kind of way, maybe cooperation or getting some pulleys and levers to lift it up. But for me, I just lift it. Now, I'm not suggesting that giants built these structures, right? I'm not suggesting they didn't. But the point is that whoever did may have not thought much about it. They just did it because that's just how they did things, right? You've got the Inca walls that I mentioned. You've got the underwater structures in Bimini, as well as the Indian Ocean, as well as in Japan now. We've found a few things off the coast there. And again, you can argue they're natural formations. I would argue differently. but they are from cultures that we have lost everything from. Like, we've lost every piece of information from these cultures. We don't know who they are, not even a little bit. And this also extends to Göbekli Tepe, which pushes the oldest known city or oldest known construction way out beyond what we felt comfortable with, right? All of a sudden we have this completely unknowable complex. We immediately ascribe it some religious function. Of course, that's what we do. That's our go-to thing. Oh, it's a religious artifact. Sure. But it was deliberately buried for whatever reason. And we have no idea who built it or why. None. There's no culture that we know of at that time that would have done that. But clearly it was done. So, there are these mysteries that we're completely baffled by. And then I like to go to the myths, like I mentioned earlier. They're vimanas, they're voice-controlled doors, they're flying chariots. The Bible is chock-a-block full of these things if you read it, with the right perspective. There are similar flood myths across the globe. We spend time and time on this. Language, linguistics as well. There's this astounding similarity in ancient cultures and how they viewed the creation myths. And what happened to us now, dim past, right? The Tower of Babel, the confusion of the languages. We spent quite a bit of time on that recently, right? But the flood, I tell you, when we did the show on the floods, that blew me away. It's the most show notes we ever compiled. It's 100 pages, and it's really literally just listing all these different myths. That's all it is. It is not really the similarities which I find astounding, because they could be ascribed to cultural cross-contamination and so forth. It's the differences in the flood myths, the regional differences. It wasn't always a man like Noah that survived in a boat. No, different. They survived in mountains and caves. They survived by being helped from outer space. An iron ship descended from the heavens and took them up, for example, right? There is so many, variations on the theme, that it is clear that they're describing the experiences of the survivors in that particular part of the world. Again, I'm not going to argue the point here. It's really about a summation of the hypothesis. I spoke about the linguistic similarities, and Berlitz gives some great examples. Berlitz actually is the grandson of the founder of the Berlitz language schools. So Charles Berlitz himself was quite linguistically gifted. And there are many, many, many different mysteries that surround language and speech itself. You've got very odd language groups like the Berber, for example, or the Basques, which can't be placed anywhere. It is that their languages are completely unrelated to anything near them or around them or anywhere else in the world, for that matter. So, there are these groups of these islands, I want to say, of language in a sea of other languages. It's fascinating stuff. And then, of course, my contention that the original language that we had was telepathy. And the language confusion was brought about to divide the human race and, you take away its common purpose. Because the easiest way to do that, short of killing it, is to no longer have everybody being able to communicate with each other. That's brilliant. I mean, if we no longer can talk to each other, we can't have a common purpose. It's very, very hard. It's very hard. I mean, look at today. The biggest divider between people think it's religion, it's this and that. It's language. If you don't speak someone else's language, you have nothing in common. It's very hard for you to get along. Sometimes religion can be used to bridge that. Philosophy, other things can be used to bridge it. Can be used to bridge that gap. But fundamentally, the language divide is the most profound that we experience. That's why I encourage everybody to learn as many languages as you can. Learn as many languages as you can. But I do maintain that the original form of communication that we have had was telepathic. And I don't mean telepathically thinking words at each other. I'm talking about true telepathy, meaning there's actually no language involved. The language would be anathema. We are talking about concepts, feelings, emotions, the whole experience we would be able to communicate amongst ourselves. Imagine the purity and speed of communication that we would be able to achieve, right? But we're digressing slightly. Interestingly enough, there are some artifacts of knowledge that have survived in more or less modern literature, and we can only assume that these authors got it from somewhere. So Swift, for example, Jonathan Swift, Irish author, brilliant, love him, who wrote Gulliver's Travels, and he mentions Phobos and Deimos, the moons of Mars, and their specific properties, and he mentions them in Gulliver's Travels in 1726. That's when Gulliver's Travels was published. However, Phobos and Deimos and their specific properties were only discovered in 1877. That's a little odd. Old maps show geographical features that should have been unknown at the time. Should have been unknown at the time of the map's creation. And the awareness of the Earth's curvature before even that official discovery can also be found in maps. Charles Hapgood wrote a really fantastic book in my bookshelf here, and I've got it somewhere. Charles Hapgood's Maps of Ancient Sea Kings. Again, I urge you to do the reading yourself. It's really very interesting. And then, of course, we have the moon, and I could talk about the moon until the cows come home. It's potentially the largest artificial artifact in our solar system. In fact, some ancient cultures speak of a time before the moon, when NASA deliberately crashed a space vehicle on the moon. It rang like a bell. The moon, that is, not the space vehicle that was crashed, indicating the moon is hollow, or at least has very large cavities within it. There are very many things that are very strange about the moon. The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun and exactly 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun, meaning the moon in an eclipse covers the sun perfectly. That's such an unlikely event. It is. I can't even begin to describe the mathematics of probability or statistics that would speak against this from ever occurring, right? But there are many other things about the moon which are very strange, right? Not least of which some of the lights we've seen, the excellent work that Jose Escamilla did around bringing us, the moon in full color, showing us the lights and so forth. You should really take time out and watch his documentaries. I love them. I really did. It's just another thing that can open your mind. And I don't want to talk too much about the moon because we're running out of time here. And then, of course, the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt. According to Bode's law, there should be a planet at the position of the asteroid belt. And then all other planets, except for Neptune, actually follow Bode's law. All of them, except for Neptune, like I said. In fact, there should be a planet X as well, according to Bode's law, which is really very interesting. So Neptune is an outlier, doesn't really conform at all. And the asteroid belt sits where a planet should be. Now, scientists will argue, it never formed into a planet. I go the other way. It was a planet once, and it was blown to smithereens, is what I think happened. That's just me, though. I'm a crazy shiny side outer with a tinfoil hat, right? So what do I know? But certainly Planet X. And so these are astronomical units. Like, for example, an astronomical unit, an AU, is the distance from the Earth to the Sun. So that's the base unit. So that's 5 astronomical units. Asteroid belt is at 2.8. Jupiter is 5.2. Saturn is 10, and so on and so forth. Except for Neptune, that doesn't have a place in Bode's law. Pluto is almost where it should be, 39.5, but Bode's law predicts 38.8. And Planet X, which we haven't found, should exist according to Bode's law at 77.2 astronomical units, which is the mean distance between Earth and Sun. AU, mean distance between Earth and Sun. So 77 of those for Planet X, which is very, very. Clearly it's far out on a massively elongated orbit around the Sun, if it exists. But Bode's law, like I said, predicts a planet where the asteroid belt is and no planet where Neptune is. Yeah, it's interesting. Now, the asteroid belt, could it be that it was once a planet? could it be that we were so advanced, like talking about the human race here now, that we actually managed to blow a planet out of the sky? Yes, absolutely. I have no trouble believing that at all, because we truly are that insane that we, if we had the means to do it, we would. We actually did drop 2 nuclear weapons. Well, sorry, atomic weapons on people. We did do that. It happened, right? Would we be able to do much more than that? Yeah, I think we would. And I wouldn't stop with the planet. I don't think. I think if we had the chance, we'd blow entire solar systems, and entire galaxies, even, if we had the means out of the sky. But look, that's all we can cover for today. And at the next week, there's a lot more. A lot more, and we're going to get into the meat of it. Just as a preview, we're going to talk about those people that seem to be living here with us in the matrix, in the box, what do you want to call it, that are fully aware of that and take advantage of it. And I'm going to be talking about their view of the world and how different it must be from ours. Again, like I said, if you're a mayfly, everything in your life happens in a day. According, if you look at it from a human perspective, we think it's pitifully small, and we don't really think about, much about the mayfly. If we squish one, so what? It's just a mayfly anyway. Imagine how a creature would feel that lived thousands or millions of years longer than we do. We live, let's call it 100 years at best, right? At the moment, 100 years. And somebody else that lives 10,000 years, 100,000 years, or a million years would look at us and think of us pretty much in the same terms as a mayfly. Who cares? It's barely life anyways in the creature there, right? And I think that's one of the major differences in perspective between those that seem to be running this.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Right back. But I do believe the music should be starting. Oh, and there it is.